Hi, everybody, and welcome to Gen Friends. We are going to talk about two Who Do You Think You Are episodes and get caught up. We're going to talk about the Hillary Duff episode, and then we're going to talk about the Molly Shannon episode. So before we get started, I'm going to introduce our panel. We have Christine Woodcock from Genealogy Tours of Scotland. How are you tonight?
I'm great.
Fabulous. I'm so glad you're here. And we have Mary Kircher-Roddy from MKR Genealogy. Hi, Mary.
Hi there.
And we have Melissa Barker, our archive lady. So we are all excited to be here. How are you, Melissa?
I'm doing great. How are you, Cheri?
I'm good. I'm so glad to have y'all here so we can talk about this. And we're going to get started with the Hillary Duff episode of Who Do You Think You Are? And Hillary wanted to learn about her mom's side of the family because she didn't know very much. And all she knew was that her mom came from a poor little place in Tennessee. And apparently her mom wasn't good enough for her dad's side of the family. So I guess she was trying to vindicate her mom. So that's what she wanted to start off with. And she started off giving the genealogist her information. Does anybody want to take it from there? As to what happened, who she found, where they started, where they went back to? From Texas, they went to Virginia, where she connected to, oh gosh, what was his name? I know what his name was. Spotswood.
Spotswood, that's right.
Spotswood. And Spotswood is one of those kind of gateway names. When you get that, you know, you've got somebody good. And so she discovered that he was actually the lieutenant governor of Virginia. And so they took her to Williamsburg. And I haven't been to Williamsburg. I live close enough by. You'd think that I would be there, but I hear it's wonderful. But they took her there, and then she was able to see, was it a replica of the original house? That's what I think that's what they said. I don't think it was the original house he lived in, but maybe I'm wrong.
I thought it was a replica.
I thought they said replica.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah. And so she was able to go in and look at the papers that they had about him there being the lieutenant governor. And what I thought was interesting is, even though he was lieutenant governor, the governor was still in England and he wanted to stay there. So he needed somebody to go take charge. And that's where her ancestor, how he became lieutenant governor and he was in charge. So they found some really interesting paperwork, I thought. They found some letters that he had written, which were from manuscript collections. And I think sometimes we forget to look at those manuscript collections. We're all into the census records and the wills and all those things. And we forget to look in manuscript collections. And that's where they found these letters, handwritten letters that he'd written in the 1700s.
And then we have our archive lady who works with that kind of stuff all the time.
All the time. And so she was probably going, yes.
Yes, I was, because, Cheri is so right. I've been a genealogist for 28 years, and so the last 8 years I've been an archivist. So it's been interesting to flip the tables and help our genealogists as an archivist. And so I find that many genealogists either don't know about manuscript collections, or they're intimidated by them, or just don't know what to do with them, or a lot of manuscript collections are not online. And so it's like if I can't find it online, then they don't exist. But if you want to find some of the best stuff, it is manuscript collections, because the way I describe what a manuscript collection is if you yourself were to take all of your genealogy stuff, all of your photos, your census records, your family group sheets, your photographs, your diaries, your everything, and box it all up and hand it over to the archivist, that's a manuscript collection. So just think about what people have boxed up. And so you can find anything, especially correspondence.
Sure.
And so it's fantastic.
Yeah. The thing about manuscript collections too is they're not necessarily in the place where the events took place. They can,
exactly.
If somebody inherited the family papers and they live in Oregon and all the stuff went on in New York, the manuscripts can be in an entirely different location.
That is
And I will say that archivists now and archives are really getting better about trying to get their finding aids online, so that at least you can search the finding aids and just see what are in those collections, and then you can access them.
You know, and I would encourage people too, if it does kind of intimidate you, to go to a library or historical society, someplace that has a manuscript collection, just go and visit and ask them questions. Maybe don't use that as the initial research trip. Just go and ask them how things work, you know? And so instead of stressing yourself out about, I need to find these papers and I don't know what I'm doing, I know sometimes if I'll just go on a field trip to check out what a place has and talk to the people, I feel so much better about then going home, gathering all the things that I need, and making that research trip. Now, if your place is far away, you're not going to want to do that. But I mean, places around
Oh,
you.
maybe you will.
Yeah, well, and so I
Road
just
trip.
sometimes just going and just asking, how do I do this? How does your process work? You know, and just kind of meeting people that work in there have helped me quite a bit. It doesn't seem quite as intimidating.
But you know, it's really, sorry, Mary.
I was just going to say, even if you go to an archive near you that's got nothing to do with your family, that you learn the
Yes.
process. You don't have to go with your family's experiment. You can go test the waters on randoms near you.
Absolutely, and that works the same way with courthouses and you know, any of those kind of things. Go into the local ones and kind of get a feel for it, and then you'll have so much more confidence when you do take those road trips and go research. So those are some really good tips.
Well, and
And
it's
I
the
would even-
manuscripts where you
Go
get the
ahead,
original records, right? It's in the manuscripts you get the original records, right? That's where you get your "who do you think you are" moment when they bring the real stuff out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is so true. Well, with these letters, I thought they were so intriguing because he was talking about the pirates of the Caribbean. That's what he was learning. I'm thinking Johnny Depp. You know, I'm getting all excited. He was worried. He was writing to England saying, hey, we need some help here. They're coming. They're coming up the coast and they're threatening us, and they've got thousands, and they're going to come and they're going to steal everything and kill and plunder and take everything we have. And so he was writing to England, and it took him a year to get any kind of response. But if you think about it, correspondence, not like he could email or send him a text message, get your people here. I mean, he couldn't do that. He had to write a letter. So then they were showing newspapers from the London papers where they were telling him, you know, hey, you got our approval. You can go kill them. You can do whatever you want with them. Go forward and get the pirates. So he got permission to go do that. And I was all excited because the one he wanted to get was Blackbeard. And he wanted Blackbeard. And, you know, I live in Myrtle Beach, and just down the road is Murrells Inlet. Of course, it wasn't called Murrells Inlet when Blackbeard was hiding his booty there. But there is legend, don't know, I don't think anybody's ever found it, but there is legend that Blackbeard came into the cove that is now Murrells Inlet on many occasions and buried treasure there. So when I saw that name, I was like, oh, we're talking Blackbeard. So
it's interesting that you had that reaction, because we were down in North Carolina. We used to go to North Carolina, and down Roanoke is where he was killed. So, you know, the kids and my husband and I wandered through the woods and landed in the ocean, and, you know, there's a stick there my kids, even at a very young age, who knew who Blackbeard was, and Hillary Duff didn't.
Yeah, well, you know, and maybe it was the cameras on her. Maybe it was like, you know, sometimes, I know sometimes when I get in situations, my mouth, you know this by listening to me on here, my mouth doesn't work right, and I say things. It's like, no, that's not what I was meant to say. And so who knows? But I love that they took her to where the battle was, where he was killed.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really cool. And listening to the story about how he, you know, came swashbuckling in there and thought he was going to win the day. And they ended up killing him. And then the gross part where they beheaded him and put his head on the ship and rode him back up to Virginia to say, hello, we killed Blackbeard. Here's your proof. We can't just tell you we did it. We got to show you. So I think the English were very into that kind of thing at those time period.
Drawn and quartered and sent to the four corners.
Exactly. Well, then from there, she wanted to know more about him, because there was another letter that they had her read, and he was talking in this letter. He was writing the letter to a cousin, and he was referring to their family crest. And he was asking the cousin if he'd changed it. And he was talking about how his crest had the thistle and the rose, and the thistle meaning Scotland, and the rose meaning England. And he referred to having lost it all under the thistle. And so that was really intriguing. And so, of course, where'd she go next? Scotland. She goes to Edinburgh.
Edinburgh.
So, Christine,
I've taken that same taxi ride many days.
tell us about what she discovered there.
What did she, actually, it was really interesting for me because I had just come back from there.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, going down and going in, and it was Nick Barrett, who is he's with London, actually, the fabulous guy. And they were upstairs right across from the National Records in the room that we all go to.
You're right, I
Pick me,
So
pick
funny.
me. Yeah, and so then they gave her whole connection back to none other than Robert the Bruce, which is like, you know, that's gold. We get so many people who have Scottish heritage and they so desperately want to be connected to Robert the Bruce, and 9 times out of 10 they aren't. And here we had one who actually was and had the proof of it as well. Incredible.
But she didn't even know who he was.
Yeah, she didn't know who he was either.
Well, she does now. She does now.
She
And
does
she's got
now.
somebody she was talking about telling her 5-year-old, you know, who loved playing knights. You know?
Yeah.
Look who your great whatever 21st
21st great grandfather.
grandfather was, you know, and to be able to walk once again, somebody who got to walk where their ancestors walked. And be able to go. I loved that he was buried, you know, right there at the altar of the abbey, and that she was able to go there, and that brass, because I lived in England when I was a teenager, and my mom used to do the brass rubbings. And I thought, oh, I wish we'd have gone and done that there. I wonder if they would have allowed it at that time, because we've got a few, because I guess they're not allowing the brass rubbings anymore. But this was like back in the olden days as a teenager, and
I've done a couple, yeah.
and they would let you do that. And so my dream is to be able to connect. Wouldn't it be interesting if I actually connected to one of those people that she took
Wouldn't
the
it? Yeah.
time to do the brass rubbing? I've always dreamed that I'd be able to do that. But that's what I thought of when I saw that beautiful brass etching of Robert the Bruce laid across.
Now, see, what I thought of was I need to get in a plane and I need to get a car and I need to go to Dunfermline Abbey right now.
Well, if you go, see if they'll let you do the brass rubbing, okay?
If I get arrested, you'll know whether they do or not.
You'll say, but Cheri told me to. Yeah, so I mean, I thought that was just absolutely fabulous to be connected in history that far back. I mean, so many of us just could dream of that, you know, to be able to say, look at your ancestry and have this big old chart done for her. And I hope she got a copy of it. I hope they were able to.
I'm sure but you know what? That's another one of those gateway things, right? As soon as you connect into a certain thing, everything's already done. So then you get this huge big chart.
Yeah.
So that's what we all want, is that gateway ancestor where everything's already done.
Yeah, mine. Yeah.
I don't have any gateway ancestors.
Not that
I have to slog through every single one.
Me too. I'm slogging through the swamps in South Carolina going, did you bury these people or just throw them?
No.
And then might just disappear because they came from nowhere.
Yeah. I've got a lot of those. I've got a lot of those nowhere people. Does anybody else want to say anything else about the Hilary Duff episode? I mean, I think it was wonderful that she was able to get back and learn some history and
I found it refreshing, actually, to talk about the crest, the family crest, because there's so many that are not actually family crests. So I was really refreshing to see her read about a family crest, and it was legitimate and wonderful, and so I really enjoyed that.
Right, and that they're not, as far as, and tell me if I'm wrong, they're not passed down generation to generation, are they? They are awarded.
Yeah, so you can apply for one to the Lord Lion. So if I had one, then my living children could inherit it when I die, but their children couldn't.
Okay.
Okay. The person has to be alive. And then, then you could go like, the grandchild could go and say, okay, well, this is my grandfather's, and I would like to have one, and then they would alter it in some way that would make
Okay.
it unique to you.
Okay.
So it may have
Okay.
much of the same thing, but there'll be something that's a little bit different.
Okay. So back in Robert the Bruce's day, and you know, as they went down the line, they were awarded these family crests for something.
Yes.
And all the little symbols on it represented something that they did.
Yeah.
To show that that's their family. Is that right?
Yes, and
Okay.
that's still the way it
Okay.
is. It's
And
still
that's still the way it
representative.
is. Okay.
Yeah.
So
In fact,
when
they
you
just did one for Meghan Markle. And there's a huge connection to California in it. So it's got the sun, and I know when they did, I can't remember if it was Kate's or when they did Diana's, they amalgamated. I think it was Kate's because she already had so they amalgamated the two families into her crest.
put them together.
So,
Yeah, I've read about that too.
Yeah.
Where they'll take, especially if you've got two, you know, noble or royalty,
Noble.
they'll
Yeah.
noble. Okay, they'll put them together. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like an old-fashioned pedigree chart, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you could probably get those if you get the originals, look hanging on the walls of a castle, and maybe figure out who belonged to who.
You'd need a castle for a chart as big as the one she got with Robert the Bruce on it.
Exactly. Does anybody else have anything, or do you want to move on to Molly Shannon? Up to you.
Let's go to Ireland.
Okay,
Ready
let's
to go.
Let's go to Ireland. I have to tell y'all that this one made me cry. This one, I was so touched by her story that I was crying. And my kids always go, "Mom, why are you crying?" Because it's touching me. So Molly, oh, she had such a sad story about her mom. Her mom died when she was 4 years old in a car wreck, along with her baby sister. And I loved that she said, I want to do everything I can to honor my mom, you know? So this journey was to honor her mom and to find out where her mom was from. And I just thought that was absolutely just wonderful. You know, she says, of course, you know, you got the grieving, but my purpose is always to honor her and the mom that she was and the things that she taught me. And I just loved that. So that was, you know, tier 1, tier 2. It just started coming that she wanted to do that. But she was able to find her found her grandfather's naturalization papers. And that's what led them, and in most cases, the naturalization papers will lead you back to the country of origin. And that's what happened with her. And she was able to find that. Does anybody want to talk about naturalization papers? Because most my people were all here way before.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah.
Well, some of it is, you know, it was her grandfather who was the immigrant.
Right.
And so when you get those post 1906 or so naturalizations, there's so much more detail.
Yeah, she had a picture.
My people came in the 1850s, and you know, James Ahern, labor, age 22, from Ireland. Well, it's like 5 other guys on that same ship. And I don't even know if that's the ship my guy was on. So
I hear you.
It's nice to get the details.
Yeah, the photo, the first thing I saw, oh my gosh, she's got a picture, because she, you know, didn't know him. You know, he had passed away when she was little. So she didn't know him. So now she has a picture. Now she has a place of origin. She has his original name because he had changed his name. And it said, you know, the original name also known as, you know, the name he had changed to. And so she had that and was able to see where he'd come from. And so, of course, that led to going to Dublin, a place I want to go to someday, because I know my Doherty family must have come from Ireland somewhere.
Pretty sure.
I just don't know where. So, yeah, so she gets to Dublin, and they pull out the census records, the 1911 census records, but they don't look at them online. They pull out the original records.
I thought that was cool.
I thought that was so cool.
The original census records. And I loved it. She goes, okay, tell me what I'm looking for. Show me what to do. What am I? And she was so excited this whole journey.
Oh my gosh.
She was thrilled. And that makes a difference too when you're watching these. I mean, I love all the stories, but when somebody really is interested and really wants to know, and that's captured on film, that makes the show even better. So go ahead.
So much of that. I was really taken with her in this episode because she seems so not celebrity, so just so normal. I mean, like
Yes.
I would be if they were showing me these records of my family. And so just genuinely
Mhm.
excited about meeting the people and seeing these things. It was
Yes.
it was just such a different kind of view of her than I've ever seen.
Yeah, I
really
agree.
liked
I
it.
agree. So she finds 2 generations back. Wasn't it 2 generations back on the census record? And what's interesting in these Irish census records at that time period that they were recording religion,
Mhm.
which makes sense. It's Ireland. And do they do that on Scottish census records at all? Do they record?
Yes, I do.
Do they do on Scottish
Yeah.
ones too? Okay. So, it shows that she's Catholic. And then they're able to produce some marriage records for her ancestors. And what was really interesting was that her great-grands, although the census records said that they were, or was it great-great, whatever grands it was, she was Catholic, yet the marriage license indicated they were Protestant. And so that was a real mystery that she wanted to figure out. So she gets to go to the little island that they were from. And it turns out, as it often does with all of our families, whatever's going on at that time period in history is what is affecting the decisions that they make. And they were during the time period of the potato famine. And there was no food. There was nothing to eat. What I thought interesting, and I know I've read this before, but to hear them say it as they're there on that island, that they couldn't hear the sound of birds or animals. It was quiet. It was just silent
Silence.
because everybody was hungry. There was no food. The birds wouldn't come there because the birds probably figured out really soon they'd eat them, if they came. They were eating frogs and seaweed and just anything that they could find. Does anybody want to talk about why they converted to Protestantism for a while?
Well, there was a clergy person, a Protestant clergy person, who started a mission of sorts, and would feed people, but only if they agreed to follow his religion. And there's actually a term, it was kind of a derisive term for people who did that. They called them soupers, Soupers, because they took the soup, but in order to get the soup, they had to turn their
Right.
back on their history.
Yeah.
Many of them turned their back on their history and family legacy publicly, but I don't think it was in many of their hearts. And
No, it
she
wasn't.
clearly came back to it. And it's like,
Exactly.
I'm, my religion doesn't do me much good if I'm starved to
If
death
I'm
here.
starving, and Molly called them temporary Protestants.
Temporary.
Temporary Protestants. I mean, just what a horrible thing to have to go through. Horrible time period for those people. And she was saying that on the island, it was one of the worst places. That whole section of Ireland was bad anyway, but the island was really bad. I mean, you're stuck, on this island. But they said of the 6,000 to 7,000 people that were living there at the time, only 600 they have record of actually converting. So there's a lot of people that went hungry, and wouldn't convert. But it was interesting too. They showed a newspaper, a Catholic newspaper, that was just condemning the practice and just said horrible things about this man because he thought it was his mission to go over and convert people. But unfortunately, he was only feeding and taking care of those who would convert instead of going in and taking care of everyone. He was not being very Christian. Is what he was doing.
No.
And only feeding those and taking care of those and educating. They had built a school, they said, and the church they were married in wasn't completed. the church that they were sitting in, and the lady was talking to her, and she was talking so softly as she told the story. I don't know if y'all noticed that, but I'm sure maybe it was because they were in the church, or maybe the sensitivity of the story, but I thought, she's talking so softly as she's telling her this, and Molly's just listening with every word, every breath. She's just into the story, and listening, and just loving every minute of it, and feeling for them, and thinking, I probably would have done the same thing. Like, we all were probably watching, going, yeah, for some soup, I probably would have said I believed anything just to get something to eat. So it's
It just reminds you, really, so many of our ancestors. I mean, in this case, it was Irish Catholics, but anytime in Victorian times,
Sure.
poverty was rampant, and they were. I mean, it was a constant fight, a constant struggle to make sure that you had food in your belly and a roof over your head. And it was, it was day to day, week to week. It was, my dad used to always say, it's survival of the fittest. And I think I didn't really understand that till I started doing genealogy. And you see what they've come through. It's like, wow.
And it's not just the Victorian times. When we lived in Limerick, I spoke with a lot of people who were raised in Limerick. And of course, Frank McCourt's book, Angela's Ashes, is set in Limerick. But even amongst the Catholic Church serving their parishioners, they still would lord it over the people that you have to behave this way in order to get the help, or whatever it might have been. And it's rarely charitable activity. It is often more controlling kind of activity. You do this and we will give you that.
Yeah. And so in his mind, maybe he was just doing the norm. Maybe that's just what you did when you went on a mission to convert people. I don't know. I don't know his story. I don't know what his ancestors know about him. There's always another side to a story. So, but the way it looks to me is he wasn't such a good guy. So, then they were talking about Ireland's oral history, and how a lot of the stories are told orally. And I don't know, is it the same in Scotland, or a lot of the stories? I would assume it's the same.
The Shawnee. Yep.
The Shawnee. Yeah. Is it the same word for
Scotland? It is. And you know what? I love that lady.
Yeah, me too.
I loved her. I wanted to go and sit in her house.
Yeah, Molly said, I loved what she said to her. She said, if I had a vision of coming to Ireland and learning about my family, this is what it would be: sitting in your house across the table, listening to your accent, telling about my family. Yeah. And she knew her grandfather.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And did I know about him? I spoke to the man.
I know. And the way she just kept saying, oh, and yes, Molly. I loved that.
Yes, Molly, I think you should.
I love that. I loved that so much. And that she was able to talk to her. And then she told us what we all would want to hear if we went to any country, or just, any state, any place where our ancestors were. And she said, the cottage
is still there.
Is still there. Isn't that something we all want to hear? We all want to hear that. So of course she gets in the car and she goes and she knocks on the door, and the lady comes out and she's explaining who she is, and she says, my family used to live here, and she says they still do.
I'm your cousin. Come on in.
Yeah. They went to commercial.
And then the look on Molly's face when she was going in, she's like, whoa! Hit the jackpot.
I know it. And she had her mom's first cousin was there. That's just amazing. Just amazing. Just pictures. They showed her pictures because her grandfather had gone back. He wasn't, the yank has returned, as they said. The yank has returned. He didn't just leave like so many unfortunately had to do, and then they never were able to come back and see their families. So he was able to come back, and they had pictures of him when he was there, on one of his trips, and that he was bragging about his family and how proud he was of them and how much that touched her. Oh, I loved that.
I love that.
I loved that.
And then they took her up the hill.
And then they took
And
her.
I was guaranteed, I had in my head, because you see the stone wall, and I thought, oh, they're going to take her to the cemetery and show her the
That's
grave.
what I
And they
thought.
didn't, did they?
And they may have.
This is your land. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Right. And maybe they did, and it just didn't make the cut or something because everything else was so cool. They just didn't have enough time to put it all in there. So, but
Yeah,
yeah,
maybe.
so she's standing there on this land.
I know.
And I know, and they say, see these rocks? They made these rocks with their hands all the way up the hill.
All the way up the hill. And that's very common all along the countryside.
Yeah.
Right through the UK, really, in Ireland.
Yeah. I have been to England and Scotland. Yeah. Didn't make it over to Ireland, but yeah, England and Scotland. And yeah, those rock walls, yeah, are so wonderful. And then from there, she could look across into the Atlantic Ocean. And there was a place where he would go and fish, and they still called it Owen's Island or Owen's Land or Owen's something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they still
Owen's Rock, I think.
Owen's Rock. There you go.
Yeah.
So they still called it that. I mean, how amazing. And she left her. She said, I'll leave you here. One of the cousins left her and just said, I'll leave you here, but we want you to come back to the house when you're done taking all this in because I have more people for you to meet. So Molly stands there and I'm, bawling. She's looking out over the ocean and just looking around. This is where they were from. This is where they lived. This is where I'm from, which is always that thing that I hope they all feel. And for some of them you can tell that, yeah, they're feeling that. And some of them you wonder, but I would just wish for everybody, whether you're really into genealogy or not, just have that moment of standing where they stood and just taking
Angie Harmon. Do you remember her episode? Like
and the big
ages
field
ago? And she was at the farm and she said, "Now I feel whole."
Yes.
And I thought that is such a good way to put it. Now I feel whole.
Right. We all need that moment to connect, whether it's overseas somewhere or a plot of land in the next county over that you didn't know about.
Well, you did know and you just haven't been.
And you haven't been. Yeah. Take that moment to go there and just think about them and breathe it in and just reflect on you're where you are because they were there.
They were there. Yeah.
And regardless of whether you agree with their lifestyles or their whatever was going on in their lives, that doesn't even matter. What matters is you're here and you're you because of them. And so experience that moment. That's just
absolutely.
So yeah, we need to be on a campaign to make
Well, I think I already am.
Well, yes, you definitely are as you take people over. So has everybody on this panel had at least one of those moments? I know you have, Christine, because you live it all the time when you go over there. Mary?
Well, but you know what? I live it all the time for other people. It was only this time that I was able to live it for myself. So,
that's true.
And it really is overwhelming.
And it's different, isn't it, when it's for you?
Absolutely.
Not for other people. Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. How about you, Mary?
I've had several. I had a wonderful one last fall. I was in Virginia and I got to go to the house that was built in the 1760s, maybe, where my great grandfather or maybe fourth great grandfather was born in that house.
Oh, wow.
And family still owns it. It's like a fifth cousin that owns it. And just to touch those walls and breathe that air was just
there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. Melissa?
Oh, I experienced it several years ago. Mine's maybe a little bit more morbid, but my grandfather, who I never knew, who died in 1972 when I was 3 years old, the company, the factory or whatever that he worked for in Ohio, it's still there. It's still the same place and everything. And I had always been told that he died of a heart attack opening the door for a fellow coworker, a woman, and he died right there on the spot. And so y'all are going to really appreciate this. My brother and I were there for my cousin's wedding. It's in Akron, Ohio. And we went into the company and we asked the gentleman there, we said, which door would have been the employee door back in 1972? And we told them why. And he looked at us so strange. He said, y'all are weird people.
only genealogist.
And so he said, well,
win.
I know. And well, he said, I really don't know. He says, but I can tell you what door has always been the employee door. So my brother and I actually got pictures of us touching the door handle, standing there. But even something like that, because my grandfather fascinates me. There's certain stories about him that just fascinate me that I can't prove. It's just lore. And so to even just stand where he stood when he died, if that's where it was.
Yeah.
It's that connection to your family members that you didn't know, whether or not
Absolutely.
they're 200 years ago or just, back in
Sure.
1972.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
just that connection that keeps you going and keeps you
Yeah.
researching. And it's that's what keeps me, it's just awesome. That's why I love genealogy.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a couple of different experiences like that. In the South, you've got these oak trees that are hundreds and hundreds of years old. And so I've been on a couple of pieces of property that have had these oak trees, and I know that they had to have been there when my ancestors were there.
Mhm.
So nothing else on that property may have been there, but that tree was. So I'd go over and touch that tree, because they may have touched that tree or they at least saw that tree because they had to have been there when they were there. And just recently down in Charleston, I went into the French Huguenot church and I had ancestors that actually worshiped in that church. So that was really, really cool to be able to sit there and just think about that, and that they sat there in these old pews and and worshiped. So there's just nothing like it. There's just that sense of connection. And I think I've told y'all this before. Sometimes just driving through some of the counties where I know my ancestors lived in, as I go do work, as I go to do research, whether it's for me or other people, I'll go through and I can just feel them going, "Hello, you're back." You just feel that connection that, yeah, my ancestors worked in these fields and lived, in these places, and this was their life for so many
There's a
generations.
fish and chip shop in the east end of Glasgow, and it's been there since 1840. And my girlfriend's husband's family were all from that area. In fact, his great great grandfather was a policeman in the area. So we had got, of course, you have to go in, right? So we were in there, and we're having fish and chips, and it was supposed to be, some of the best. And she was saying, and they would have come in here and they probably ate in here. And I'm thinking, yeah, they haven't changed the grease since 1840 either.
Probably not. That's really funny.
I'm very fortunate because I researched my husband's family too, and I'm extremely fortunate that we live where his family's from. I mean, before they came from, North Carolina, when Tennessee became Tennessee. And we live on property that has been in the family for over 5 generations.
Wow.
So when I drive around our county, I see his family everywhere. But I'll tell you a really quick story before we go. Several years ago, when his grandmother was still living, she lived on the corner just up the road from us where there was a major intersection. I say major intersection. It was a flashing red light. Around here, there's nothing major, but so small. But her house, the home place, was right there on the corner. Well, she eventually had to leave it and go into a nursing home and things, but she got to come out and we would bring her home for dinners and things. And someone had bought the property and they actually had torn down the house. It was completely gone. And we were taking her back one time and we got to that corner because you have to stop. And she looked over and she was just looking over there and she says, "It's amazing." She says, "It's like we never even existed."
Oh.
And that has always stayed with me.
Oh,
Another reason why I want to document family members,
and those
because
stories.
she helped to build that house, and she raised her family and her grandkids, and just on,
Right.
and it's gone. I mean,
Yeah.
the land's still there, but it's
Right.
just the house is gone. And that's what she said. She said it's like we never even existed, and there she was right there. And I thought, wow, that was so profound to me that it just made an
Yes.
impact.
Oh,
Yeah.
that does. And on that note, we'll have to end tonight because we've gone over a little bit. But I would like to encourage everybody to make that a goal in the next few months, is to go and find a place where your ancestors once lived and walk that land, visit those homes if they're there, visit those churches, anywhere they may have been, go stand there and think about them and what they did in order for you to be where you are, and see if that doesn't touch a part of you that you hadn't even known existed before. It's something that you'll never, ever forget. And on that note, I would like to thank you ladies for joining us on Gen Friends.
Thank
It's
you.
always such a pleasure
Thanks.
to talk to you and hear your insights on the different shows that we talk about and the different subjects that we talk about. You're such a pleasure. And so I'm so grateful for each of you for being here. We will see you again next time on Gen Friends. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Night.
Bye.